What's up everyone, it's Jonny from Jedl and I'm going to show you the simplest way to get full marks in your Section 1 paper for your English exam. So we're going to be looking at the short answer paper for the 2023 HSC as an example, and I'm going to show you exactly what I would do if I was in your shoes in the exam hall answering those questions in timed conditions. So let's get into it. How would I answer each question of the 2023 HSC exam? Now Section 1 is called Section 1 for a reason. So let's make sure we do Section 1 first, because reading time is best spent reading through the Section 1 material, looking at the unseen texts so that you can answer those questions straight away. Time is of the essence for Section 1. Time is of the essence for the entire paper. And the most efficient way to use your time is to use your reading time to read the questions first, read the text, think about how you're going to answer those questions, and then as soon as writing time begins, start writing those answers. Now, if we're being honest with ourselves, of course you'll be tempted to have a quick look at the essay question for Section 2, the common module essay. Have a look at that question. Don't freak out if you don't understand it. You're going to come back to it. But make sure you go back to Section 1 and spend the majority of your reading time, i.e. 9.5 out of the 10 minutes, reading those questions and looking at the texts. If you decide to do the essay first when writing time begins, you are going to have to reread those texts and therefore use another 10 minutes and probably not finish the exam. So make sure you do Section 1 first. Now, when we get to Section 1 here, let's open up the 2023 paper. We want to make sure that we don't immediately go into the texts. There's no point looking at a text when you don't have the question in mind. We want to be an active reader. We just want to be as efficient as possible, make sure we have enough material for our answer, and then move on to the next question. But to do that, we need to have the question at the forefront of our minds when we're looking at the text. Don't be a passive reader. Don't just read a text and come up with general ideas. Think about how the text can be interpreted in relation to the question you've been asked. So the first thing you're going to do is go through the paper and look at all the questions. Now, for this paper, we have 5 questions. And before I even read the actual questions on the page, I'm actually going to first look at the marks. I always look at marks first because I want to get a feel for the structure of the paper. I want to visualize the structure that I need to follow for every single question. That lets me know how many techniques, how many sentences I need for each question, and how much time to spend on each text in reading time. There's no point spending half of your reading time on a text that's only worth 3 out of 20 marks. So here we can see question 1 is 3 marks. So in my head, I'm thinking 3 sentences. I'm going to lead with a topic sentence and 2 sentences of analysis. For question 2, it's 4 marks. So I'm going to write 4 sentences. I'm going to write a topic sentence and 3 sentences of analysis. For question 3, it's 4 marks again. So I'm going to do a topic sentence and 3 sentences of analysis. Question 4, another 4 marker. Topic sentence, 3 sentences of analysis. Notice I'm not mixing anything up. May as well be as simple as possible, as concise as possible, because again, time is of the essence. Only do as much as you need to, as long as you do it well. Question 5 here, 5 marker. 2 ways you could do a 5 marker. You could split your answer up into 2 paragraphs or a mini essay if you like, something that I would recommend doing for a 6 or 7 marker. But a lot of students like to just do one bigger body paragraph, and I'm going to attempt it that way to show you the simplest possible method to get full marks. Hey everyone, it's Jonny from Jedl, and if you want to check out state rank examples, band 6 analysis, step-by-step guides to constructing the perfect essays, craft of writing pieces, whatever it is that you need for your English exams, then go to jedl.com. We've put everything in one place for you so that you don't need to look any further to get everything you need to succeed in your exams. And if you want to submit a draft and get expert marking, or you want to use our marking tools to get specific suggestions on how you can improve your essays, your creative writing pieces, anytime, anywhere, make sure you sign up to Jedi. It's less than $10 per week. Now that we've looked at the marks and we understand the structure of the exam, we understand the questions that need the most time, like the 5 marker, and the questions that need a little bit less time, like the 3 marker, we can get into our question breakdown. So I'm still not looking at the text, I'm breaking down the question. So question 1, I want to find the keywords of the question. Why does Dank prefer that gravel and dust comfort away from that other place. So I've been given an extract, a direct quote from the text that we're looking at. So I need to keep that in mind so that I know when I read that text, I want to look for that quote and think about what that quote means in the context of the text as a whole. So we want to interpret the line or the quote that they provided us here with the context of the broader text in mind. Ideally, you don't want to analyze that in isolation. You want to look at the sentences around it so that you can get a better understanding, a better interpretation. Now, the key word in this question, why does Denk prefer that gravel and dust comfort away from that other place? Well, the key word here is there's a preference, prefer. Why does Denk prefer the gravel and dust comfort, that environment, away from that other place? So I can see here, this is about a conflict or a tension between two places. So there's two types of places. Why is there a preference for the place that has gravel and dust over the other place? I need to figure out what that other place is, and then I need to come up with a solid reason with 2 sentences of analysis to back it up. Now, if you struggle with any analysis skills, make sure you check out Jedl.com. That's where we've got all of our most comprehensive resources that unpack all of these text types, mark allocations. They show you exactly how to answer all of these questions, basically. They'll give you all the technique tool sets. They'll show you examples. Everything you want is there alongside all your text-specific analysis for your other modules. So if you want to see exemplars, A-grade responses, full mark examples, jump onto Jedl.com and get yourself a subscription because all of that comes with just the one bundle. Now for question 2, keywords, analyze Langbroek's representation of the emotional impact of new places. When we talk about keywords, we're not talking about directive terms like analyze. We're talking about the words that you need to use basically in every sentence of your response. So here, analyze Langbroek's representation of the emotional impact. We need to identify and expand on an emotional impact that new places will have. So something about new places, but mainly what's the emotional impact? And I need to give examples of those impacts and say things about that impact. Is it a significant impact? What type of emotion is evoked by that new place? We need to go into all of that detail. How, why, so what type? Answer those mini questions, expand on those key words so that we can actually give a specific answer. So emotional impact, new places, keyword in that question. What about for our question 3? How does Hemblin expand the reader's understanding of the paradoxes? Notice the words of the question often come directly from the rubric. So make sure you're familiar with the key words of the human experiences rubric. Words like motivations, behaviors, emotions, qualities, paradoxes, anomalies, inconsistencies, shared experiences, individual experiences, storytelling, and so on. There's about 10 to 12 keywords in there that I would be familiar with, and just make sure you know how to deal with each one, define each one, and that will really help you in the context of the exam. Now here it's talking about paradoxes, i.e. contradictions or conflicting attitudes or emotions or something that has a tension in it of consumerism. So I'm going to think about a paradox as a contradiction. I'm going to think it's probably going to offer 2 different perspectives, or it's probably going to address 2 different perspectives that seem like they're at odds with one another, that they don't agree. So I'm going to look for that tension, that contradiction in relation to something about consumerism, something about buying stuff. Question 4. For question 4, how does Robertson challenge the trend towards self-narrativization in modern culture? Now, it's quoted self-narrativization, meaning that's probably something that, to understand it, I need to look at the text for. So don't freak out if you see a question like this and think, oh my gosh, self-narrativization, what on earth is that? I'm thinking the same thing. Don't worry, we'll get to it. We'll look at the text. I'm sure it breaks it down, probably has a nice definition for us. Great. But what's the key word of the question? How does Robertson, the composer, challenge? There's a challenge of a trend here. So challenge, we need to think about how the author is challenging a trend towards self-narrativization in modern culture. So we want to come back to the idea of self-narrativization, whatever that means. We're going to learn that from the text. And we're going to constantly think about how that idea is being challenged. And we're going to come up with techniques and quotes to support our point. For question 5, analyze how O'Sullivan captures the idea of being in the moment, okay? Again, words like how, they're basically always implied in questions. You're always going to look at techniques. You're always going to need quotes to back up what you're saying. So how is an important word, but it's not the key word that you need to use all throughout your response. In this case, captures the idea. The word idea is never a key word. We've got to look at what it says after that. The idea of being in the moment. So this is about being in the moment, being present. it's good to just quickly think about synonyms that relate to that, not so that you can use synonyms, but so that you are more flexible with your interpretation and so that it's easier to actually understand the text and apply that text to this question. So being in the moment is the 5 marker, the bigger paragraph where we'll need 4 pieces of evidence to back up our point. All right, awesome. Let's jump into the first question. All right, so question 1 is a prose fiction extract. So that's basically like a page being ripped out of a novel. Imagine Harry Potter, grab a page from the middle, rip it out, analyze that page. That's what a prose fiction extract is essentially like. Something from a novel or a short story. In this case, it's just the 1 page. Thank goodness, you're probably thinking, you don't want to read a 3-page prose fiction extract for a 3 marker, but you're getting an extract, a piece of prose, which is just your standard novel or short story, and you're being asked a 3-mark question on it. Now, I've had a read of this, I'll be honest with you, I've had a read of each question here. I looked at these obviously when it first came out in 2023 for the HSC, but I haven't looked at this paper until now. And what I've done is I've reread each text once, thought about a few different techniques and ways that I could answer the question, and then I'm going to answer those questions live in front of you now and walk you through my process. But before I do that, I do recommend you pause the video now, read this text one at least so you can follow along. You always do 1 read of a text just to get a sense of what it's about. Don't worry if you don't understand every little thing. That's a common mistake people make. They think, because I don't understand the text, I can't attempt this question. Completely wrong. What you can do is read it once, try and get a feel for whether it's kind of like a positive tone, a negative tone, get a sense of the general quality of it. Who's speaking and how do they feel on a very general level, positive, negative. Maybe there's a bit of both. Great. Then what you can do if you don't understand the text is just zoom in on the parts that you do understand and then try and respond to the question using those extracts, finding techniques for those particular extracts as well. So you zoom in on the parts that you do understand, even if you're taking them out of context and don't understand the whole piece. But for the purpose of this video, pause the video now, read the text, and then let's go through it. Okay, so I'm on the Jedi platform, of course, to construct our answers. This is the best expert marking and feedback platform available right now. So if you ever wanted to submit a draft and get an expert to look at your response, to let you know what grade your response is, let you know if you're up to full marks, what if it's a fail, we need to actually look at that for you, get experts to assess it, and give you the specific feedback you need to improve your work, whether it's an essay, whether it's a story, an imaginative, a reflective piece, whatever it might be. Submit your answers through Jedi. You can get the expert feedback, and you can also get instant feedback using our teacher-trained AI tools, which will give you specific suggestions on different pieces of your work and examples of how you can actually improve them. Very specific. You can get estimated grades, marks, all of that available on Jedi. And if you want access to Jedi, just go to jedl.com and sign up. It's less than $10 per week. So that's just at the moment. If you're interested in it, make sure you check it out. Now, here the question again, 3 marks, 3 sentences. Why does Denk prefer that gravel and dust comfort away from that other place? So my first sentence is a topic sentence. So I need to, in a very concise way, address my main point here. I need to talk about why there's a preference. What is it about this other place that Denk, the author, doesn't like? So if I'm looking at the text again, and I'm assuming you've read it all once, I'm just going to zoom in and highlight a couple of things that I think are really important. First thing is, I always read the first couple of sentences. It usually gives you a good indication. So I always read those first couple of sentences 2 or 3 times. One extraordinary time, I felt the strangeness of an unfamiliar terrain. Great. We know that this environment is unfamiliar. A strange new pressure of wet pebbles and the tickle of moist sand pushing itself between toes that until then had walked only in dry, dusty earth. Okay, this person's going from an arid landscape, dusty, dry landscape, imagine them in the country, and they've gone to somewhere with wet pebbles, so they're probably at a beach, they're probably near the ocean. We will definitely figure that out by the time we read more of the text. But straight away in the first couple of lines, I get the sense that there's a tension between these 2 landscapes, these 2 environments. The question is, why does the speaker prefer the gravel and dust rather than this wet ocean environment? Now, on my mind is the quote that's in the question, that gravel and dust comfort away from that other place. So I want to scan this and find where that is. It turns out that quote's all the way down here at the end. And like the becoming of good friendships, I crave that gravel and dust comfort away from that other place, the place of sand that makes odd noises in my ears. See, what we can see there is this person, this character, the speaker, doesn't feel comfortable. I mean, it says they feel comfortable with the dust and gravel, but they don't feel comfortable with the strangeness of the ocean environment, right? The place of sand, the beach. Now, we need to read back up to see why exactly that is. We're getting a sense of it here. It makes odd noises. Clearly they don't connect. So already I'm thinking there's a sense of disconnection, and I only need a little bit more than that to construct the topic sentence. So I'm getting a sense that there's a disconnection with this ocean environment. I want to figure out why. So if I was to scan through, I can see that there's lots of odd noises. It's really got that auditory imagery, and I'm making mental notes of just a couple of techniques that I might be able to use here. It's got auditory imagery. The sand on that beach created a million minuscule pressure points under my soles. Look at that, hyperbole, a million. Whenever it sounds like something's been exaggerated, that's called hyperbole. So we'll use that probably as a technique because it sounds like they're in a little bit of discomfort here. The sand created a million minuscule pressure points under my soles. It tried to swallow my feet, so it's been personified now. The sand is being personified, and it's being personified in an antagonistic way. It's swallowing my feet, it's aggressive. This character, the speaker here, Denk, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Denk sees the place of the ocean as a threat. It's a threatening environment because you can see the language there, swallow, is quite aggressive and intimidating. And the salt water rushed to carry off small shells and seaweed that caught in my toes. For me then, sand and shells and seaweed remained just what they were. So there was no transformation in them. They were just what they were. They didn't connect. This is that disconnection. So I think I'm going to use that. I struggled to listen or think or feel or see or believe their indecipherable story. Aha. So I think we found the crux of the piece. If you can find a good line like that that connects to why they don't prefer the environment, you're good to go. We just basically need to put that into our own words. So I struggled to listen or think or feel or see or believe their indecipherable story. Now that repetition there of or, that listing with an and or between each of those words is called polysyndeton. So that's a technique we might also use. And you can see it's all the senses, listening, thinking, feeling, seeing, believing. They can't connect in any way with the story behind this landscape. So when it says an indecipherable story, they can't connect with the landscape on a spiritual level. Great, I think we've got more than enough, to be honest. So if we're writing our topic sentence here on the Jedi platform, I'm gonna do all of the questions here because it's nice and easy. I can show you all the elements. Let's get that first sentence in. Denk prefers the, quote, gravel and dust comfort, just to use some of the words of the question. I'm going to use the whole quote because then it just gets repetitive. Good to just pluck out the key part. Now, we understood that that's where Denk has her home. That's where she is comfortable. That's where she's from. So Denk prefers the gravel and dust comfort of her home environment as she is unable to spiritually connect. That was the whole, I can't listen, I can't feel, I can't believe any of the story attached to this place. Spiritually connect with the foreign ocean landscape. So even if you were only able to pick up that there was an ocean or a beach around, as long as you can say something specific, like unable to spiritually connect, that's our specific insight here. That's our specific insight. Then that's enough to get you the mark for that sentence. It's as simple as that. Treat it like a formula. There's our topic sentence. Keyword of the question, there's our link to the question. Okay? And now we need to have two sentences of analysis. So I've got to go back to the text really quickly, and I've got to find two quick techniques that will support this point. Where's she unable to connect and why? All right, the sand on that beach created a million minuscule pressure points. That million, it stood out to me. It was an obvious exaggeration. So I'm going to use that as a hyperbole. So I'm going to say, and I want to use short quotes as well. The hyperbole of a million minuscule pressure points, that's it, that's all we need. The hyperbole of a million minuscule, you might say that's kind of an alliteration as well, but sure, we don't need to focus on everything. Minuscule pressure points There we go, that's our quote, looking back at the paper. Notice the simple structure I'm using here. The technique, the hyperbole of a million minuscule pressure points, there's my quote, right? It's that simple. The hyperbole of a million minuscule pressure points, what does that do? It emphasizes is always good for hyperbole because it is emphasizing something. The hyperbole of a million minuscule pressure points emphasizes the speakers or protagonists, or whatever you wanted to say, we'll say protagonists, or Danks, because the question says Danks' discomfort, right, in the landscape of the ocean. And now we need to say something specific here. Like, okay, we've said discomfort, a million minuscule pressure points. That's what she's feeling on her soul. But let's say something else specific. Like, what's going on here? Why is she able to think about a million pressure points? It's because that's all her attention's on. She's not able to absorb anything else about the environment. So the hyperbole of a million minuscule pressure points emphasizes Danks' discomfort in the landscape of the ocean as she can only focus, right, on the physical kind of impediments rather than its beauty or something. She can't absorb any of the beauty in the story of it, okay? That would be plenty to get the marks. Now, the key is that we need to link this always back to the preference, but in this case, it's a pretty clear link. Emphasizes Danks' discomfort. Discomfort, comfort was in the question, so that's a decent link to the question. And our specific insight here is she can only focus on the physical impediments rather than its beauty, okay? So that is the specific insight. She can only focus on its physical impediments, like the things that are hurting her feet, rather than its beauty. So those specific insights that essentially make up the explanation or the effect of the sentence, that's where you get the marks. Okay, third sentence, what's another technique that you can see here? Let's try and keep it simple, although I did mention polysyndeton earlier, so maybe we'll use that. I think this is a really good quote that connects to why she prefers the other environment. Danks says, I struggled to listen or think or feel or see or believe their indecipherable story. So it's such a good quote, I'll use that one. Now to start the third and final sentence here to get the third mark, we can just do a very similar sentence structure. You don't have to do anything fancy. Something like, moreover, the polysyndeton in, then we can do the quote. Now I'll see if I can get that in here. I struggled to listen or think or feel or see or believe their indecipherable story. Now, all of those things, to give a specific insight here, we have to think about what the quote's really saying. Focus on all the words, listen, think, feel. Okay, it's very sensory, it's to do with the senses. So that's gonna be my key word that allows me to make a specific insight. So the polysyndeton here conveys the speaker's inability to connect with the environment, with the new environment, on any sensory level. Thus, now I'm going to do a little connection back to the question, thus informing her preference for, notice preference was the key word, for the gravel and dust comfort, So just ensures the marker knows I'm always coming back to answer the question by doing this linking part at the end here. That's great. And then we can see all of the components. Got my technique in there. I wasn't too fancy with the way I structured this, so we will just put this in like that. Conveys the speaker's inability to connect with the new environment on any sensory level. The sensory level is the thing that directly connects with the words of the quote. That's what's going to give you that sophistication, and you only have to do one of those specific related points each sentence of analysis, and then make sure there's a link to the question. Great, 3 for 3. There's all the components. Hopefully this is helping. This is all on the Jedi platform, which you can get access to. It's less than $10 a week to submit a draft at any time, get feedback from experts to see how you're doing, see what grade level you're at going into your assessments and exams. Now, let's get to the second question here. Analyze Langbroek's representation of the emotional impact of new places. 4 marks, 4 sentences, 1 topic sentence, 3 sentences of analysis. It is a formula that you just need to know and that you can apply on the day. Make sure you're familiar with it. Keyword of this question was emotional impact relating to new places. But I really want to dig deep into the emotional impact. What is the emotion? What is the impact? What's the extent of the impact? Why is it important that there is an impact? Why is there an impact in the first place? They're the things to unpack so that you're not repeating yourself in every sentence of analysis. Because you've got to provide 3 sentences of analysis to back up your point. You don't want to make the same point every single time. So you might tell me how the emotional impact came to be. Tell me something about it. Maybe it could be unexpected. Then tell me the extent of it. Tell me why there's an emotional impact. Tell me what happens after the emotional impact. Tell me what emotions are actually being triggered. So different things to consider to flesh out this response without being repetitive. But I want to get that topic sentence down, so I need to give like an overall emotional impact about this, and I want to relate it to what the text is saying. Now, like before, pause the video, read the second text, do that one quick overview. Even if you don't understand all of it, doesn't matter. Have one quick overview. Have one quick read so that you get a feel for the gist of it, and then join me as we unpack it and write a quick answer for a 4 marker. All right, so let's get into our answer. We're looking for things that relate to an emotional impact, anything about emotional impacts and new places. It's a memoir extract, non-fiction, speakers talking about their own view on this, Kate Langbroek. So she is explaining how different places have different feelings associated, which makes sense. Hawaii, Thailand, New York, the name of the place conjures a mental picture. Yes, if you think about Hawaii, you think about, having a pina colada, or maybe not pina colada, you think about having coconuts and beach and surfing. All of these things come to mind, and that can create a feeling that's associated with that. So that's the point of this. She's basically explaining that at the start. You might not find a technique straight away. It's not too technique heavy at the start, you could say. It's kind of spelling out what the whole piece is about. That certain places bring to mind certain things. There might be cliches or stereotypes, but nonetheless, the point is that places actually have an emotional impact because of the memories and the cultural associations that we make. Now, you read through this, we're trying to find kind of the key point. There's usually a couple sentences that really sum it up. One of the key sentences here is, we have no idea of the way in which it will open up to us and us to it, and yet we think we do. So when you go to a place, you don't know how it's going to affect you. So after I read this sentence, we have no idea of the way in which it will open up to us, that is a foreign country, and us to it, and yet we think we do. What I'm getting from that is that the emotional impacts that a new place can have are often unexpected. They often defy our expectations. And notice that it says, we have no idea. It's very certain, it's very definitive. So that's high modality language. You can think of MEST. If you're not familiar with MEST, check out our other videos, check the resources on Jettle. But MEST, modality, high modality, is language like we must, you have, I am. It's just definitive language. The speaker here is very definitive. We have no idea of the way in which it will open up to us. So high modality emphasizes that the emotional impacts that a new place can have are often unexpected. They often defy our expectations. Great, that's one sentence of analysis that we will use. Now, again, I'm still coming up with the topic sentence here, but I'm just scanning through the piece to get a sense of the different types of evidence and points that I want to make that will stem from that topic sentence. Few places on earth, it seems, conjure up more of an emotional response than Italy. So it's very explicitly responding to this question, this piece. So it's talking about Italy. Let's see if we can find some techniques here. It is a land that transcends cliche. So it goes beyond cliche by simply piling on more of them. So there's a paradox for you. If you want to talk about a paradox, it's saying it is not cliche because it has so many cliches. And that's a paradox. That makes it unique, that it has so many things that seem familiar, that seem stereotypical. Afternoon slumbers and wine, church bells and saints, terracotta-colored villas, and washing hanging over balconies. See, it's painting this image. So this is imagery here. Visual imagery, you could say. Afternoon slumbers and wine. I mean, church bells and saints, terracotta-colored villas, and washing hanging over balconies. So visual imagery reminds us, the reader, of these cultural associations that we make with the place of Italy, with new places, and therefore demonstrates how memories and mental images can actually trigger certain emotions. So there's something going on there. There's also, you can see a list of all of these different things, grapevines and pasta. Whenever you see a list in a piece, think accumulation. Accumulation, that's a list of things, okay? And the list here is for emphasis, obviously. It's saying how many things there are. So it provides a big list of all these cliches, and that tells us that actually that's something that's quite unique. It tells us that there are all these culturally significant elements that create this unique emotional impact, that create, I would say, an emotion of awe. It's good to, every time you bring up emotional impact, good if you can say a specific type. Always be specific where you can. So there's something, we can definitely do something with accumulation there. It is cobbled thoroughfares and picture book villages. It goes on to keep talking about what it is. It is golden light. So it's just saying Italy is all of these things. Now, I like this line here. And again, focus on the lines that make the most sense to you. Focus on lines that, firstly, you can see a technique for, and secondly, that actually makes sense to you, and that makes sense to you in relation to the question. So almost three things. You can see a technique, the quote makes sense to you, and three, you can see a link between that quote and the question. If you don't have all three of those, you're probably not going to do a very good sentence of analysis. Falling in love with a country is like falling in love with a person. Okay, so there's a simile there, there's an analogy there, there's a comparison between falling in love with a country and a person. It's personifying the country as the object of a person's love. It's actually saying that the emotional impact can be so great of a new place, of being in a new place, that it compares to falling in love with a person. So there's a love that comes from a place just like a person. So there we're getting a sense for the extent of it. And I think we already have our 3 sentences of analysis just from scanning through, finding a few sentences that we like. Okay, that falling in love one, our last point, is talking about the extent of the emotional impact, that you can actually love it like a person. It can have that much of an impact. You can have that much of a connection, an emotional connection with a place that compares to loving another human. We also said before that you can get an emotional impact because of all of the culturally significant elements that can inspire awe. Okay, so that was the second point. The first point, we were saying how the emotional impact can come from its unexpected nature, the fact that we don't know what kind of impact a place is going to have. Okay, fantastic. So all of that together, we need to get our topic sentence and then just quickly write those up. And you can just mentally brainstorm those on the day as you're doing the reading time. You'll do it very quickly, and then you can just flesh them out in a quick 4 sentences here. So let's start the sentence. I never overthink starting the sentence. We just want to be guided by the words of the question. It says, analyze Langbroek's representation. So I'm going to say Langbroek represents. And then to make sure I'm not repeating the words of the question, I want to add some adjectives and expansions on the keywords. So Langbroek represents what kind of emotional impact? The intense emotional impact that new places can have on individuals by portraying a deep sense of gratitude for the foreign landscape of Italy. Okay, so we're being quite specific there to show that we understand what was going on a general level, but we've got gratitude as an emotional impact. That's just summarizing the overall tone. It's always good to say something specific. Intense emotional impact. That's also us trying to be specific in terms of linking to the question. So use the keywords of the question, but do more than use the key terms of the question. Don't use synonyms, expand on them, but make sure you're actually saying something specific, and good if you can link it to the overall vibe or focus of the text, okay? Awesome. Now we need to quickly pump out those 3 sentences of analysis that we talked about. So let's go back to our text. So we're going to go to that first quote that we identified in the reading time, or maybe it was after reading time, but quickly scanning through. We have no idea of the way in which it will open up to us and us to it. So there's this kind of reciprocal, it's like back and forth, there's a reciprocal relationship. It's kind of a two-way street in terms of the impact, but it's also unexpected. That's the key thing. So straight away, the high modality in we have no idea of the way in which it will open up to us. We don't even need the and us to it. Like if we don't go into that, don't worry about that. Okay, the high modality, there's our technique in a simple way of transitioning into the quote. You don't have to be fancy with the way you bring in your evidence. You just should do it straight away so that you avoid storytelling. Get straight to the analysis. The high modality, and we have no idea of the way in which it will open up to us, emphasizes. What does it emphasize? It emphasizes how new places often have what? Unexpected. Unexpected was the key word. That's the specific word that connects to the quote. We have no idea of the way it will affect us. Emphasize how new places often have unexpected emotional impacts, right? Often have an unexpected emotional impact. And then we could say, because it says in which it will open up to us, revealing itself in mysterious ways to inspire. Revealing itself in mysterious ways so as to inspire. I'm connecting this to a specific emotion. I'm going to try and do that each time. So as to inspire curiosity and wonder. Now, I don't usually like list in here, but I'm just going to put a couple in to show you that there are some specific emotions you can tie this to. So notice the structure again, the high modality technique in the quote. Use the shortest possible version of the quote, but enough to make sure you're capturing all the context. Emphasizes how new places often have an unexpected, there's the specific part, emotional impact, because you don't want to just repeat the words of the question, but you do want to keep referring back to the actual key terms of the question. That's why I keep saying emotional impact. Then we extend on it to make sure we're also linking to the question in a specific way, revealing itself in mysterious ways so as to inspire curiosity and wonder. That's where we're nailing the emotional impact part, saying different types of emotions that come from the unexpected nature of the place. Okay, this is sounding really good. Hopefully it doesn't feel too impossible for you to replicate yourselves. What I'm showing you here, of course, I've had a chance to read through it once. I am writing this for the first time, but I've made mental notes of these techniques as I'm reading it with you, and I've had a lot of practice doing this, but these aren't necessarily that good. They're just good enough for the marks, and that's all I'm trying to show you. Using simple techniques, simple sentence structures. I'm using simple techniques, simple sentence structures. I'm trying not to do too much. A lot of students overwrite. They waste time writing 6 sentences for a 3-marker rather than just writing 3 good sentences for the 3-marker and saving more time for the 4 and 5 markers. Okay, second sentence of analysis. Let's go back to the document here. We were going to do something about all of the cliches being listed, so we can talk about, you could do, again, if you just saw imagery, you could talk about visual imagery of the terracotta colored villas and washing hanging over balconies. Gives us that mental image which conjures up certain emotions for us reading it. But I might just take the accumulation more generally, the list of cliches. The accumulation of cliches, for example, afternoon slumbers and wine, church bells and saints. I'm just going to do 2 of them. You only need to do the bare minimum. I need to show at least 2 to show that there's a list going on for accumulation, but that's more than enough. Okay, so we can go additionally. The use of, that's another way you could start it. You could say the technique or the use of accumulation in afternoon slumbers and wine, church bells and saints. The use of accumulation in afternoon. Okay. Now, what do we want to say about that? That kind of, now we don't want to say emphasizes, because we already said emphasizes before. Try and mix up your verbs. I use spiced, suggests, illustrates. Excuse me. Now, we don't want to keep saying emphasizes for our verbs, so I would use spiced, suggests, portrays, illustrates, conveys, emphasizes, depicts, or demonstrates for the D. And you can rotate through those, you can reuse them. Try not to reuse the same thing in the same answer, of course. But here we're talking about how the accumulation here reveals, highlights, and we'll just say conveys. Use of accumulation conveys the sense of awe that can be inspired from culturally significant elements that we associate with foreign places, in this case, Italy. Okay? So something like that. That would do the job because it's got the technique in there, as you can see. It's got the technique. It's got the quote. It's got the sense of awe. Now that's an emotion. Now I do often like to say the word emotion just to really link to the question, but I like actually having a specific link like that. It's inspired from culturally significant elements that we associate with foreign places. That's the cliche part. So that's a very specific read into that quote. That makes sure that the marker knows we've understood that particular part. Okay, great. One more to get our 4th mark. We said we were also interested in the simile here. A lot of you might pick up on a simile. Falling in love with a country is like falling in love with a person. Okay, great. So finally, if you got a 4 marker, I don't mind saying finally for the last one. We don't need a link sentence underneath this. Just do 3 good sentences of analysis. Finally, the simile in, notice there's nothing fancy about this. The simile in falling in love with a country is like falling in love with a person, okay? The simile in falling in love with a country is like falling in love with a person. Demonstrates the extent, now this is the extent of the emotional impact that a new place can have, and we definitely need to be more specific than that, can have on a person by suggesting the love, the emotional, the passion one feels for a country is comparable, is analogous, is alike, or is similar, by suggesting the passion one feels for a country is similar to that of another human. Okay, so we're basically just spelling out what that quote is saying. We're saying it in different words, and we've said that that connects to the extent of the emotional impact that a new place can have, right? It's a significant extent. So that's the link to the question. And then the specific insight is the passion one feels is similar to that of another human. Great, and we saw there was our technique. Notice the pattern in these sentences. Nothing too fancy in any of these sentences, but we're doing enough to get the answers. All right, hopefully you're following this. Let me show you the next one. How does Hamblin expand the reader's understanding of the paradoxes of consumerism? 4 marker, 4 sentences. I'm going to start going through these a little bit quicker as hopefully you're getting the hang of it. Now, going to the text here, make sure you pause, read the text now, read the text in this 2023 paper. It's a short text here, feature article, it's non-fiction. And we need to make sure that we have 3 solid pieces of evidence to back up one key point that links to this idea of a paradox connected to consumerism. So, because it's a feature article extract, the toughest thing about this for a lot of students is finding techniques. So I will try and point out a couple of different angles to use for finding those techniques, but we'll also look for the more common ones as well. So make sure you read everything here. By experiences, not things. I mean, it tells you straight away what the contradiction is going to be, what the consumerist, it tells you straight away what the paradox is going to be, that there's a contradiction, there's a difference, if you like, between buying an experience versus a thing. So it's going to be pretty in your face about how it's answering the question. The key thing is going to be about how you break that up and how it actually expands our understanding of that paradox. So live in anticipation, gathering stories and memories. Okay. In the journal Psychological Science last month, these two authors, along with this doctoral candidate, Amit Kumar, expanded on the current understanding, this is sounding like the question, that spending money in experiences provides more enduring happiness. Okay, so the first line leads out with in the journal Psychological Science. So it's referring to an academic journal. That means that for this point of view that's being presented, there's credibility behind it. So in a persuasive text, if you're trying to convince someone of a particular point, which this is, it's trying to make an argument, that would be called ethos for credibility. So the author here, Hemblin, is building credibility by referring to an academic article. He's provided a quote from that article, so you could even say it's an intertextual reference or a textual reference, but I would say more accurately, it's a citation. He's cited the academic journal and actually provided a quotation of it. So that's backing up his perspective. So he's used that to deepen our understanding, but more importantly, to legitimize his perspective on whatever this paradox is. Now, what is the paradox? Essentially, when you can't live in a moment, they say it's best to live in anticipation of an experience. Experiential purchases like trips, concerts, movies tend to trump material purchases. So it's saying that instead of buying material possessions like a couch or a TV, buy an experience that you can, first of all, get excited about and then also look back on. You'll see by the end it talks about remembering, but also enjoying it as an experience with people. So the paradox of consumerism is that money can buy you happiness if you spend it on the right thing. That's the nuance of it. So it's playing upon that idea that money can't buy you happiness. This is saying, whilst money can't buy you happiness if spent on material possessions, the article suggests that money can buy you happiness if you spend it on experiences that can be anticipated and remembered. That's a really nice topic sentence for you. In fact, I'm going to write that in. So let me try and remember that now. So whilst, or we'll say, actually, I want to go keep it simple. How does Hemblin expand the reader's understanding? Hemblin expands the reader's understanding of the paradoxes. No, I'm just leading with the question because I don't want to overthink it. I don't want any of you to overthink it, but you do need to unpack it. Hemblin expands the reader's understanding of the paradoxes of consumerism by, I need to actually say how now, otherwise I'm not going to get the mark for that sentence, by suggesting that money can, in fact, buy you happiness when spent on experiences that can be anticipated and remembered. Now, the paradox bit is the can in fact, because it's saying this is contrary to popular opinion or contrary to the age-old saying, money can't buy you happiness. We don't need to say that explicitly, but the in fact kind of addresses that. Money can in fact, contrary to popular belief, that's saying, buy you happiness when spent on experiences that can be anticipated and remembered. It's not the consumption itself, it's not buying that actually makes you happy though. The paradox is that you're spending your money on something intangible. It's not actually a product that we typically would think of when we talk about buying something to make you happy. It's not a material possession. So that's the caveat. Anyway, you can see link to the question is here because we lead with the question actually in this case. Let me see if I can. There we go. By suggesting that money can in fact buy you happiness when spent on experiences. So that's the specific insight that goes beyond the question. Fantastic. So, evidence. We said there's ethos built to build legitimacy in this perspective. So that's going to expand our point of view because we now believe what we're reading because there are academic authorities behind this perspective. It's been studied, it seems. A doctoral candidate. I'm impressed. So, what else does it say? We've got one technique. I need to find two more. We're just finding 3 techniques. I like to look at different parts of the text because they're unlikely to repeat the same point. So I found something at the start, right at the front. I always like finding something straight away. We've got the ethos point given by the citation of the academic work of those scholars. Experiential purchases are also more associated with identity, connection, and social behavior. I'm just scanning this through as I would in an exam. I'm stressing, I can't find any techniques. Looking back on purchases made, experiences make people happier. This is why nonfiction's tough, because it's just direct. Experiences make people happier, then do possessions. Like, what am I gonna get from that as a technique? It's okay, stick with it, you'll find something. Let's find something. Actually, most of us have a pretty intense capacity for tolerance or hedonic adaptation. Whenever you see those words that have asterisks on them and then they define them, obviously it's worth reading that, but don't freak out. They're typically things that I would avoid. If I wasn't familiar with that language, I would just avoid it and zoom in on a sentence that I was comfortable with. Remember the trick? Find sentences, find parts of a text that you understand, that you can find a technique for, and that you feel can link to the question in at least one specific way. Where we stop appreciating things. Okay, then it says, phones, clothes, couches, etc. just become background. Okay, that's a short sentence, so short syntax. What an easy technique. Always a good one for a nonfiction especially. You'll often find that there are these short, punchy sentences. In this case, it actually lists these material possessions as well, labels them as background, so it's a dismissive tone. Phones, clothes, couches, accumulation, just become background, dismissive tone, short syntax, characterizes them as something that is insignificant, proving the point that material possessions won't affect our happiness, whereas experiences that can be remembered will. So that's a solid point we have there. So that's our number 2. We only need one more. And we've got our 4 out of 4. It's the fleeting, okay, I'm just reading other sentences. They deteriorate or become obsolete. Okay, great, that's another short sentence if you wanted to use that one, but I like this one better because it actually says the specific things, so I get more out of that quote. It's the fleetingness of experiential purchases. By the way, I'm not using that other one because it's saying the exact same thing as the previous sentence. Don't use pieces of evidence that make the same point. That's why I always look at different parts. It's got the even a bad experience becomes a good story. Notice the contrast there. I like how that relates to paradoxes because there's an opposite there, bad and good. Even a bad experience becomes a good story. So that's called antithesis, where you see the use of opposite words there, bad and good. The contrast between bad experiences, good story, is actually demonstrating the paradox that what might seem like a negative or underwhelming experience, because it's something that will be remembered, because it's something that's shared with others, it actually is positive. So what seems like negative is actually positive. Even a bad experience is a good story because it's remembered, it's something you can reflect on. It lends itself to reflection, and reflection has value. So there we go. I'm happy with our 3. We don't need to look any further. Once you've got your 3, you're good to go. Let's jump into the analysis here because I am doing the full paper here. I'm going through everything, so hopefully this is very helpful for you. All right, now 3 sentences of analysis. Let's go back up to remember them. Okay, we had the textual citation, inclusion of the citation, the reference to the psychological science journal. So whether you want to call it an intertextual reference, I mean, it is. I would just say the academic citation. Okay, so the use of an academic citation, or you could just say quotation, whatever comes to mind. You might not think of citation as a word, but you might think, oh, the quote from the article. Great, just describe the thing you're talking about. The key thing is that it's lending legitimacy to this perspective. The use of an academic citation to begin what is this? It's an article, okay? To begin the article, the use of an academic citation to begin the article, referring to the journal, or we can say the use of an academic citation from psychological science you could just do a single quotation mark here if you wanted. Okay, to begin the article, referring to referring to the idea that money can provide more enduring happiness, can provide more enduring happiness. I'm just quoting this bit here. Provide more when spent on experiences. Expands the reader's understanding of the paradoxical value. I'm just using the words of the question here. The paradoxical value of consumption by legitimizing, right? By creating a sense of, I'm probably overcomplicating this sentence, to be honest. Let's just pause here. This is how you overcomplicate a sentence. The use of an academic citation from the journal Psychological Science to begin the article creates a sense of ethos and thus creates a sense of ethos and thus credibility to the author's perspective by providing or we should say, by again, still overcomplicated. To begin the article, creates a sense of ethos by providing a credible perspective on the idea that money can provide more enduring happiness when spent on experiences. Okay. So we can actually just start like that. I was overcomplicating it. There's an example of how you can write too much. Just stick to the basics. The use of an academic citation from the journal Psychological Science to begin the article creates a sense of ethos by providing a credible perspective on the idea that money can provide more enduring happiness when spent on experiences. Have I linked that to the question enough? How does it expand our understanding of the paradoxes of consumerism? Haven't really used the word of the question, so I do want to get that in there. By providing a credible perspective on the idea that money can provide more enduring happiness, that consumerism, I'm going to say that, can provide more enduring happiness when spent on experiences rather than material possessions. Okay, that's fine. At least I got consumerism in there. So, okay. Great, got the quote in there as well. Let's do the next one. So first point was about credibility. That's how we're expanding our perspective, because now we actually buy into the idea because there are all these smart people writing about it. Cool. Next one was phones, clothes, couches just become background. Moreover, the author's dismissive tone, I might double up two techniques. You don't need to do this, but I'll do it because they're kind of, simpler techniques, if you will. Moreover, the author's dismissive tone and short syntax to characterize phones, clothes, couches. Now notice this, I don't want to say etc. just become. So what I'm going to do, I'm mumbling. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete those words and I'm going to put 3 dots in there, an ellipsis, just to get to the point. And I'm going to add in the word as to suit my sentence. And because I'm adding in a word that wasn't there originally, I put square brackets around it. So phones, clothes, couches, ... I've cut out a bunch of words as I'm adding that word in. Background, great, got it to flow. Moreover, the author's dismissive tone and short syntax to characterize phones, clothes, couches as background. Now, what do I want to say? Well, it's talking about them as background. It's saying that they're not important. So that emphasizes, I'll keep coming back to the same verbs as long as I'm not using them in the same answer. I use them in other answers, but that's fine. Emphasizes the paradoxical inability. Now, paradoxical I'm just using as a synonym for opposing or contradictory or conflicting. So contrary, it's anything that's the opposite. You've got to use the word paradox flexibly because it's the word of the question. The more flexible you are with the word of the question, the easier you can answer the question. So in my head, I've always got this sense of a contradiction. Well, this is paradoxical to that because that's an experience, whereas these are tangible material things. They're not going to provide it. It emphasizes the paradoxical inability for material. See, I don't even need to have that up there. So because I don't want to repeat the point here. So I just cross that out and say, okay, I'm actually going to say material possessions here. So emphasizes the paradoxical inability for material possessions, because it says that they're background to, now let's focus on that. They become background to provide fulfillment. To provide fulfillment for an individual. Right? Due to their kind of fleeting significance. They're fleeting, okay. Because they just become background. It's fleeting into the background, fading into the background. Fading significance, either would be fine. So they have this inability for material possessions to provide fulfillment for an individual due to, why is that? So make sure you expand on these to get that specific point. Now, I want that specific insight. There we go. Okay, last one here. By the way, the ethos was credible. It was about credible perspective was our significant point here. Okay, last point was on even a bad experience becomes a good story. That's about the reflective nature of it. Finally, and I just use these same sentence structures for all these answers. Finally, the use of antithesis in even a bad experience becomes a good story demonstrates the paradox of spending money on, what was it saying? On consuming, of the paradox of consuming, I'll just say spending money on experiences that are seemingly negative, as reflecting on those experiences provides more value than the experience itself. Now, than the experience itself, that's good language to nail the paradoxical nature of it. It demonstrates the paradox of spending money on experiences that are seemingly negative. I'm going to say even. Demonstrates the paradox of spending money. Demonstrates the paradox of spending money. Well, let's say this paradoxical value. I'm going to say the paradoxical value demonstrates the paradoxical value of spending money on seemingly negative experiences, as reflecting on those experiences provides more joy on those shared experiences. Always good to use a more specific word than just experiences, shared, individual, collective. On those shared experiences provides more joy than the experience itself. Excellent. All right, great. That's how you can nail the 4-marker. So technique, quote, verb, and then paradoxical value. There's our link to the question of spending money on seemingly negative experiences. As reflecting on those shared experiences provides more value than the experience itself. What a great insight that we can finish on. So that's how you can get 4 out of 4 there. Now, next question. Pause the video, read the text. Let's go. Hey everyone, it's Jonny from Jedl, and if you want to check out state rank examples, band 6 analysis, step-by-step guides to constructing the perfect essays, craft of writing pieces, whatever it is that you need for your English exams, then go to jedl.com. We've put everything in one place for you so that you don't need to look any further to get everything you need to succeed in your exams. And if you want to submit a draft and get expert marking, or you want to use our marking tools to get specific suggestions on how you can improve your essays, your creative writing pieces, anytime, anywhere, make sure you sign up to Jedi. It's less than $10 per week. This is a non-fiction opinion piece. Remember the question, 4 marks, 4 sentences. How does Robertson challenge the trend towards self-narrativization, fancy word, in modern culture? Now again, self-narrativization will be defined in the piece. One of the most regrettable trends in the modern habitus is that of endless self-narrativization. Okay, so this person is using a lot of fancy language, but that's fine. We'll stick with it. It has the double asterisk, so we can go and see the definition. It says, crafting your personal story. So it's saying that one of the trends is that people can't stop crafting their own personal stories. Think of how the contestants describe themselves on a reality TV show. They cannot just be living their lives. They have to be overcoming adversity. All right, so if you've read this, you'll see this person's complaining about people always needing to be having a story of triumph. I overcame this hardship. I went through this as a child. I came from nothing, and rags to riches story. Obviously, people are inspired by those stories. People love a story. We're humans, we love stories. We connect with them. We empathize with them. But this person here is being very cynical. They're being very critical of that particular trend in society, that everyone needs to have a story. They say that it's kind of self-centered. They say it's misguided because no one actually cares about your story. That's what the piece is saying. So if you read it, you should get a vibe similar to what I just described. In terms of finding key extracts, how I have come to hate this word, which is now encrusted on the discourse. So he's talking about the word journey. Everyone's on their own journey. The main problem with everyone constantly nattering on about their journeys is that most people's lives, unless you know and care about them, are excruciatingly boring. Okay, there's the perspective. He's saying people shouldn't care so much about their stories. No one cares. Okay, so it goes on to talk about that. I'll show you how to find the techniques in just a second, but just getting our topic sentence idea here. We read the text once, try and get a feel for the gist of it. What's it generally about? Is it positive? Is it negative? Here we can see it's more negative. It's a critical perspective on the idea of people making stories about themselves. Everyone's obsessed with it. He's saying it's misguided, it's boring, that people aren't as interested as they think. So that's how he's challenging the trend. Great, that will basically be our topic sentence. And he's kind of ironic at the end. He says, I am embarking on a journey to ban the word journey. So he's saying my journey is to get rid of journey, just to expose the kind of stupidity of the whole thing. And he's making a farce of it. Yes, it will be difficult, but these are just obstacles on my journey. So he's being funny, it's comical. There's a sense of humor here, but ultimately it is criticizing the self-centered and misguided kind of emphasis that people put on their own journeys. So how does he challenge the trend? Robertson, again, don't overcomplicate the start of your topic sentence. Robertson challenges, I'm using the words of the question to start the sentence. Robertson challenges the trend towards self-narrativization, I don't need to repeat the in modern culture, by, I would say he's kind of satirizing, but he's mocking, ridiculing, by ridiculing if I can spell this, by ridiculing people's inflated sense of self-importance, by in always needing to have a story, right? By ridiculing people's inflated sense of self-importance as they challenges the trend towards self-narrativization by ridiculing people's inflated sense of self-importance despite the fact that their stories are not that interesting, right? Are largely uninteresting. Just something like that. That's what I get from the gist of it. I've clearly answered how does he challenge the trend? Well, he challenges it by ridiculing. He's ridiculing people's inflated sense of self-importance despite the fact that their stories are largely uninteresting. No one cares about your stories. No one cares about your stories, okay? So that's the topic sentence that we'll go with. How do we find 3 quick techniques to analyze in relation to this? For marker, we need 3 pieces of analysis. So let's see what we can find early on, if not somewhere in the middle, and then hopefully somewhere at the end. All right. I'm looking for things like sentence length. I'm looking for high modality, like no one does this. I'm looking for repetition. I'm looking for things like that because they're more common in a nonfiction piece than very descriptive language and imagery and figurative language. That might not be as common, but what will be common is the modality, even emotive language at times, short syntax, things like that, repetition. So let's try and focus on that. Nobody describes themselves primarily in terms of their role. Nobody is simply chilling, right? Nobody. That's a hyperbole, by the way. Nobody's doing that. Well, obviously, maybe one person is chilling. He's saying nobody is simply chilling. So this guy's amped up. He's had enough. But notice the repetition of nobody at the beginning of those 2 clauses. So there's the semicolon at the end, and then it says nobody again. That's called anaphora. Well done if you spotted that, or anaphora if you want, anaphora. But you don't need to use that. You could also focus on the idea of nobody is simply chilling, like it's a hyperbole. So he uses hyperbole to suggest that nobody is simply chilling, or that nobody describes themselves in terms of their role in society or community. He's saying that everyone's self-centered. It's all about their story. Okay, so I'm gonna go with that one. So the hyperbole that nobody describes themselves primarily in terms of their role in society emphasizes, notice how much I'm reusing the same kind of words and structures. That's what I want you to do. That's realistic. You get 45 minutes to do this thing. Let's make our lives easier than, well, let's make our lives easier than more difficult. Does that sound right? Let me do that bit again. Let's make our lives as easy as possible and move on to the next section. The hyperbole that nobody describes themselves primarily in terms of their role emphasizes the selfishness or self-centeredness, I'll just say. Self-centered attitudes. What about that? Of individuals as they emphasize the self-centered attitudes of individuals as they no longer care about what they can offer others, but only what contributes to their story, to their narrative. Narrativization, narrative, or story. That would be fine as a link to the question. I'll go narrative here, but that there is our link. We don't have the self-assessment things coming up here, but narrative, let's put that in bold. That's our link to the question. And here are the stories. Put that in there as well. Okay, great. Okay, so you can see we've got the technique there, we've got quote here, and then we've got our effect. The important thing here is self-centered attitudes, self-centered attitudes. Great, let's get the next sentence. They are triumphing over, okay, it's just kind of making a mockery of how people refer to people, like newspaper articles, you know. He was just a kid from whatever, Akron, or things you hear about, you know, famous sports players and others. I think I was thinking of LeBron then, Akron, if that's right. They present themselves as being the hero of their own monomyth. Okay, great. We read all this stuff, maybe we're not finding anything. Reach the cathartic denouement. All right, maybe I'm not seeing anything there. It does say when they have slain all the dragons. So that's a metaphor. That's a metaphor, slain all the dragons. They haven't actually slayed a dragon. So standing between them and success. So that again is kind of making a mockery. So maybe we can use that, slain all the dragons. He's saying that people think they're in this fairy tale. So that might help support our point that they're often misguided. So let's use that one. Moreover, the metaphor that how should we say? The metaphor about individuals. Let me see here. Striving to reach the cathartic achievement when they have slain all the metaphorical. Yeah, so it's saying that that's like the final point, right? The metaphorical goal of slaying all the dragons, I guess, is the to have. Maybe I'll say to the metaphorical goal to have slain all the dragons. The metaphorical goal to have slain all the dragons, and metaphorical is our technique. The metaphorical goal to have slain all the dragons. What does that say? Okay, let's add in a verb now. So metaphorical goal to have slain all the dragons conveys the kind of delusional stories that modern society obsesses over creating, rather than, what's he saying they should be? Conveys the delusional stories that modern society obsesses over creating, rather than kind of confronting their true responsibilities. Something like that. But I think just delusional stories is a good point here. So we can mark that in as our second point. And then I always like to find something at the end. I like the irony, as I mentioned. I am embarking on a journey to ban the word journey. Ironically, instead of finally here. Or I will say, because it's easier to structure the sentence with irony as the technique, I will do finally. Finally, what's his name? Robertson uses irony when stating that I'm embarking on a journey to ban the word journey. Why is he doing that? To mock, unless we've already said mock, to mock the kind of stupidity, you could say, to mock the stupidity of focusing on personal journeys as opposed to more significant goals in life. On crafting personal journeys, to mock the stupidity of crafting personal journeys as opposed to achieving more significant goals in life. So he's saying how stupid that is. That my journey is to ban the word journey. It's like, it all sounds pretty ridiculous. Okay, cool. So notice how simple the structures are here. There's another 4 marker complete. We are onto our first, we are onto the 5 marker. So thanks for bearing with me on this. Analyze how O'Sullivan captures the idea of being in the moment. We're gonna do this as a super quick 1 paragraph answer. So pause right now, read the 5 marker here. We've got the poem, Being here. Make sure you read it. I'm about to go through it in just a second on Jedi. Okay, if you had a read, I'm just gonna do a very quick response here. I'm gonna try and speed it up so that we can get through this 5 marker in a realistic time frame. So say you've read this, you have a look at it, okay? It seems that this person is saying you just have to embrace the moment to be happy, to enjoy the beauty of the world. They're saying that you can't enjoy the world if you're always looking for more. Sometimes you just need to be present, enjoy the fruit you're eating, look at things around you, look at nature, be in the moment. That's how you'll find fulfillment. That is the value of being in the now, being in the moment. Okay, great, simple message. So O'Sullivan, what does she do? It says, how does she capture the idea? Because it's a 5 marker, I want to give like a technical part to this answer in my topic sentence. So what I mean by that is a technique, some kind of broad technique that will encapsulate a lot of it. So I might say, O'Sullivan employs rich, natural imagery. What else? Like things that just kind of encompass the whole piece. I don't want to limit anything to one particular word, but maybe the style is always a good one. Like what kind of style is she using? Well, it's not a structured poem. See how this is a poem, but it's not structured. It has to be a thin world, surely, if you ask for an emblem at every turn, if you could not see bees arcing. It just keeps going, right? So it's actually like free verse, but it's not even verse in this case. It's basically just this endless prose, a lyrical kind of prose. So I might call it that. If you weren't sure of the form of it, actually I'm not going to call it that because I'm going to assume that maybe you'll get in there and you'll not know what kind of poem it is. That's fine. So let's go with what's realistic. It is written in first person and it addresses the reader as well. So I always think about the perspective of the poet or the voice of a poem. That's something you can bring in up front. So O'Sullivan employs rich natural imagery and a candid, means like honest, first person voice to capture the value of embracing the present moment for its kind of obvious beauty, for its kind of obvious though often overlooked beauty, for its obvious though often overlooked beauty, rather than seeking out something else, right? Rather than looking into the future. Like that's just the opposite of that. Okay, to capture the value of embracing the present moment for its obvious though often overlooked beauty, rather than looking into the future. Okay, great, that'll do. All right, we need 4 techniques to get the 5 marks. I won't bother including a link sentence for this. How can we get 4 quick techniques? I always try and find something in the first couple of lines. It has to be a thin world, surely, if you ask for an emblem at every turn. It has to be a thin world if you ask for an emblem at every turn. Now, if that doesn't make sense to you, you wouldn't use that as an evidence. You never force it. It has to make sense to you. You have to see a technique and you have to have a way of linking it to the question. Otherwise, you need to zoom in on a different line and a different part that does make sense to you. In this case, this does make sense to me. It has to be a thin world if you're constantly asking for an emblem. You're always seeking more. Nothing's ever good enough, then the world becomes thin. It's not rich and thick with meaning, okay? So it has to be a thin world if you ask for an emblem at every turn. So it has to be, that's high modality. The high modality in it has to be a thin world if you ask for an emblem at every turn. Emphasizes, again, reusing things across my answers. Why not? Emphasizes the absence of meaning. There's a lack of meaning. It's a thin world. It's an absence of meaning. That's the specific insight based on the quote. You can see thin world, absence of meaning. Emphasizes the absence of meaning that results from an inability to, or from a tendency, from an inability to appreciate the moment, from an inability to appreciate the moment and constantly seeking more from the world. Okay, great, done. Let's not overcomplicate it. Technique, quote, verb, effect, specific insight in there as well, which is nice. Okay. Second technique and quotes. If you cannot see bees arcing a mine in the soft decaying that. Okay, so they're saying, hey, open your eyes. You can see the apricots and the beautiful bees and the rest of it. Now we've got this, what have we got here? We've got a few rhetorical questions. I'm just looking for the most obvious things right now. Again, I've barely looked at this before doing this recording. Looked at it once, then started it, and it's all already foreign to me. This is why you don't do the essay, then come back to it. I've already forgotten about all of this. Okay, it says, What's amiss with simply the huddle and glut of bees, with those fuzzed globes by the hundred and the clipped out sky beyond them and the leaves that are black if you angle the sun directly behind them? So there's this beautiful visual imagery here. So the visual imagery of fuzzed globes by the hundred and the clipped out sky beyond them. That's all we need. Demonstrates the beauty of something as simple as bees in nature, okay? So this is on the other hand, because this was about the bad that can happen. The first line was about the bad, this is about the good. So this is like the visual imagery of fuzzed globes by the hundred in the clipped out sky. Illustrates the simple beauty of nature that comes from appreciating the kind of intricacies, the simple beauty of nature that comes from being in the moment. Simple beauty of nature that illustrates the simple beauty of nature that can be appreciated. Illustrates the simple beauty of nature that can be appreciated from being in the moment. Okay, that's simple. Two more. Then says, I hold my palms out like the open pages of a book. I hold my palms out. Let's think about that image. What does that mean? If it doesn't make sense to you, don't use it. I hold out my palms like the open pages of a book. It means if I'm open to the world, I get to receive the stories, the beautiful stories. Great. So I hold out my palms like the open pages of a book. The simile, I hold out my palms like the open pages of a book. Through the simile, the speaker suggests that through an openness to the world, to the present moment, one can enrich their lives with new stories. Done. That's a nice, concise one. I was thinking, oh, I need to add more. It's like, no, I don't. I set a technique and quote. I linked it to the question, openness to the present moment, and I gave a specific insight. They'll enrich their lives with new stories. Great, because it links to the book, pages of a book. The specific insights are so clear. Fantastic. Let's move on. Now I want to find something at the very end. I'm just literally just shooting down to the bottom of this poem now. Which after all, when the warm for almost weightlessness, I hold branches cutting across the sky. You're standing there while I tell you, come on, you have to try one. Okay, I tell you while I tell you. See, I tell you, the reader. That's called second person, you. I'm going to call it second direct second person appeal is what we'll call it. Finally, the direct second person appeal in I tell you, come on, you have to try one, invites the reader directly, well, obviously directly, invites the reader to share in the in the speaker's gratitude for the present moment. As each moment, now I need to give some specific insight here. I guess each moment is better when it's shared with others, right? Invites the reader to share in the speaker's gratitude for the present moment, as each moment is even greater when appreciated by others, okay? Basically saying a similar thing, but that works. Look, just a quick draft response there. We'll call that a 5 out of 5. You might have a link sentence at the end that then links back, but we got to end it there, guys. I'm drained. That's a big exam. Good luck to you guys, but hopefully that does help you. There's some simple structures. If you need more on this, go to jedl.com. All the resources are there to actually teach you how to find techniques really quickly for all the text types, examples that are broken down for how to answer questions just like this that have been methodically deconstructed. There's exemplars for essays, for your Mod A, Common Mod, Mod B, craft of writing, everything you need. It's on jedl.com. Just sign up and check out Jedi if you want to submit a draft and get expert feedback. Guys, all the best. Comment below if you have any questions or any other things you want to ask about. Otherwise, good luck. Thanks for watching. See you soon.